It's been reported that you are the first man in history with a fortune in excess of $1 billion.
I have no idea. But if you can count your money, you're not a billionaire.
Surely you can find someone else to answer your mail?
I like it, Dad.
He likes it, son. A boy wants to be useful. I find that admirable. Which reminds me, I'm firing Howard Larkin. And I'm making you Executive Vice President of Getty Oil.
All I know about oil is regular or premium.
You wanted a job, I'm giving it to you. Sink or swim. Everything has a price. I want you to have it.
It's far too extravagant for a little boy.
Well, for some little boys, it might be. Not for a Getty.
Thank you.
Thanks are for strangers. Your family, my family.
We have your son.
He's okay. He's not harmed.
But it will require
$17 million to release him. Go to the police if you like. It makes no difference.
I don't have any money.
Get it from your father-in-law. He has all the money in the world.
I want my son on a plane back from Morocco to me tonight and full custody.
What's your game?
I don't want your money.
Everybody wants my money.
You want your money. I want Paul.
I sense I'm being taken. I just don't know
What
how.
I'm offering you is the greatest bargain you'll ever get. 6 o'clock. Come.
So to the people who took him, I don't care why you did this, but I ask as a mother that you think of your own children or of the child that you once were and set my boy free. Thank you.
Her mother should cry for her son.
Let's go.
Demanding 17 million US dollars.
17 million? That's an awful lot of money for such a young boy. I have 14 grandchildren. If I start paying ransoms, I'll have 14 kidnapped grandchildren.
How much would you pay for your grandson, if not 17 million?
Nothing.
You carry a gun, Mr. Chase?
Well, it's not how I put it on my tax returns, but yeah.
Spies carry guns.
I never bothered. Ruins the line of your suit. And guns are for people who don't have money.
What do you do?
I made deals, bought people.
Keep it.
They will do things to Paul that cannot be undone for any amount of money. We have to pay.
My financial position has changed.
With all due respect, nobody has ever been richer than you are at this moment.
I have no money to spare.
I mean, what would it take for you to feel secure?
More.
Abbiamo visite. Vedi che scappavano. Gira, sta soffocando. Dov'è, ragazzo?
Fatemi le bende, presto.
Ho venduto. They sold them.
I need one thing only, and that is $17 million. $1 billion earns $17 million a month sitting in a bank vault. He could buy a Matisse every day and never spend it all.
I don't think this is about money for Mr. Getty. I've had to bargain with a lot of people. Sheiks, sultans. One thing I've learned is that money is never just money, all right? It always stands for something. Usually it stands for the one thing they've never had. Until you know what that thing is, you're just beating your head against the bricks. We'll cover all your expenses up to $200,000.
You arrogant bastard. Fuck.
The boy is worth nothing to anybody. He's a juvenile delinquent. His grandfather has disowned him. It's a tough break. You took the wrong kid, but you're getting off easy now. Your Uncle Piccolino died in custody last night, by the way. You better take this deal before the same happens to you.
I'm cool.
Oh, shit. See.
$7 million.
Hello? Paul?
Mom, is that you?
Paul?
I just want to go home, Mom.
Please come get me. Please.
Sono.
Niente stupidaggine. Vieni con me.
Drink. Fast as you can swallow. Come on, drink. You drink enough, you can't feel a thing.
What are you talking about?
Paolo, these men are going to take a part of you, the ear.
No, tell them don't do it.
Hey! Look out! Bravo. Ok, io pure. Good boy, strong boy, bravo. Ok. Da cucina.
Money. I can't bear to hear about the money. We announce I have the ransom money. All $4 million. We make the exchange, you get your window.
What happens when they find out the money's not all there?
By that time, we either have Paul or...
Now you're thinking like Getty.
Those children are my blood, Chase. They're mine. She took them.
Well, welcome to another episode of Christian Answers. My name is Pastor Jeff Short. Glad to have you along for the journey today. Again, I'll be out driving around and wanted to do something unusual today. I don't usually give movie reviews, but I wanted to give some movie reviews on those movies that I think are related to the Christian worldview. And there was a movie recently, one of many movies recently, that did address a topic that the Bible talks about a lot, and that is the movie called All the Money in the World, about John Paul Getty, one of the richest men in the world at the time. And he had not just one movie made about him, but actually a movie and then a series was made about him. I think it was Netflix or one of the major cable networks made a 6 or 7 part series about him and the situation involving he and his grandson. Now, what the backstory is his grandson needed some money. He was sort of a prodigal son. The grandson was out there in Europe, just sort of hanging out. He was a young man in his late teens, and he was just hanging out, goofing off, drinking, carousing. I think he lived in a commune. He was just living this sort of loose living, immoral lifestyle, not doing anything that his grandfather, the business tycoon, would have wanted. And he got himself into some trouble financially, the grandson did. And so he went to his grandfather, John Paul Getty, the richest man in the world at that time, or one of the richest. And his grandfather said, nope, not going to help you at all. Not going to give you any money. And it wasn't that much money. It was, I think, $5,000 or $6,000 is what this grandson needed to clear his name. Evidently, he had gotten into debt, and the people that he owed were not legit. They were connected to the mafia of some sort. In other words, there was a real dangerous, edgy connection there. And his grandfather, nope, sorry, you're not getting a penny. So the grandson went back to Europe, and he decided to hatch this plot where they would fake his kidnapping, but they would actually kidnap him, a few guys in Europe, and demand a ransom. And figuring that the grandfather would pay the ransom, because he had the money to pay the ransom, and it was his grandson that was in trouble. So this young grandson thought that he could get some money from his grandfather by staging this kidnapping. Well, what happened was they staged the kidnapping, and he was taken to some undisclosed location. The ransom was given, and the grandfather still wouldn't pay the ransom for his grandson. On principle, it's like, well, if I started giving out money every time someone threatened me, I would be broke. And what the movie and the series did was examine the life of someone, this John Paul Getty, this multi-billionaire, examined his love of money. That's what it came down to, this kind of irrational love of money that actually prevented him from being human. And so he was turning down opportunities to help his relatives, his family members, and people who you would think he would love and be open to dealing with. I mean, even if there was a ransom, if you were a multi-million-dollar or billion-dollar businessman, you would tend to want to do more than just simply say, nope, not going to pay, and just move on. Because after all, this is your own flesh and blood. This is family. So you may not initially want to pay it, and there is some logic to the point of not wanting to pay a ransom if you're a wealthy person, because then again that would set precedent, and then you might have people tending to be tempted to kidnap people in your family, because once you've demonstrated the willingness to pay, then you might be exploited. So there is a lot to think about if you are brought with a ransom demand. But the way John Paul Getty handled it was a cold business-like approach. Just said, nope, not going to pay. Very cold, very calculated. And that was the lesson that you had in this movie and in this TV series. It showed a person who displayed the characteristics like the Bible describes, the love of money. You know, the Bible in the New Testament talks about the love of money is the root of all evil. A lot of people quote that and they say, well, doesn't the Bible say money is the root of all evil? No, it doesn't say the money is the root of all evil. It says that the love of money is the root of all evil. In other words, the love of that material thing, that material value thing, that's the thing that is wrong. That's the thing that's sinful. And so we need to quote that right. The love of money is the root of all kinds of evils. That's actually the literal translation. The love of money is the root of all kinds of evils. So it's basically trying to make the point that you have this, it's kind of like an idol. You have an idol, and the idol happens to be money. And it could be any other thing. It could be cars, it could be fashion, it could be real estate, it could be gold, it could be silver. Any material thing that you put above God, that you put above everything else, that's your God. That's your idol. An idol is a false God. And so this billionaire, John Paul Getty, clearly, obviously, had money as an idol in his life. And this is why the Bible talks about money so much. And it comes with mostly warnings about money. You know, how hard it is for a rich man to inherit the kingdom of heaven. What does that mean? It means it's hard for someone who has grown attached to money, who has money, but who has grown to love money. And of course, you don't have to be rich to love money, and there are plenty of people who aren't rich who love money and love the idea, or are chasing the idea, or chasing the dream, or chasing the vision of getting rich. They're not rich, but they display all the characteristics of a rich person because they love money so much. And they put it above family, they put it above church, they put it above God, they put it above all human loyalties. It is the number one thing in their life. And so they pursue it, they chase it. And that's what the Bible talks about as an idol. Whenever you put something above God, and when you put that supreme in your life, that is a idol. That is your supreme idol. And people do that all the time with money. But there's no greater illustration of this than in the movie All the Money in the World, depicting the life of John Paul Getty in this one narrow segment of his life, where he was confronted with the fact that his grandson was taken ransom and held hostage, and there was a ransom note given. And so he steadfastly refused to intervene and do anything. Now, eventually, and a spoiler alert, some of you already know the story, but eventually there was money given and there was money handed over. But even then, it was with all kinds of strings attached, and the boy's son, the grandson's actual father, was given a loan essentially by Getty. Getty didn't even give a gift, didn't give the ransom to help the family out. The family couldn't afford to pay that. The family, they had a trust fund. Getty had a trust fund, and he was taking that out of the trust fund and using it, and then he loaned it to the boy's father, and then the father had to pay the trust fund back. It was all this kind of legalese, and this legal procedures had to be done. And it just showed you the pettiness of Getty, petty Getty. He was so trapped by his idolatry. And it also goes into a depiction of his immoral life. He essentially had about 3 or 4 women there in his mansion who, it was his harem. Basically, these women were there for whatever he wanted. He used them as almost like a harem, which is totally immoral. And not only that, it's odd and strange for people in the modern world, even Western nations, to do that. He was so cheap and tight-fisted with his money. It was all about what he could do to make a profit, and he was always looking for good deals, and he was worried about people trying to steal from him. It was a miserable life that this man lived inside his mansion. Even though he was known as one of the world's richest businessmen, he lived a pretty sad life, lived a pretty sorry life because of his love for money. That was his problem, because he was so in love with materialism, and he was so trapped by that love for money and materialism that it just totally ruined all the relationships of his life. I mean, there was suicide in his family. It's just an ugly, ugly situation. It almost makes you feel, after you get done watching this movie, it almost makes you glad that you're not super wealthy, uber wealthy, because of what it does to a person's soul. It's kind of like Gollum in The Lord of the Rings, and he finds that ring, and that possession takes hold of him, and he becomes obsessed with that ring. And not only that, but that ring ruins his life. And that's essentially what money did to John Paul Getty. And it's a good lesson. I think we see in the scriptures, the New Testament, where Jesus gives the message about the rich young ruler. The rich young ruler came to Jesus and said, "What must I do to be saved?" And Jesus said, "Go and sell all you have, give to the poor, and come follow me." And the rich young ruler, it says, turned away sadly and walked away. And that's after that scene, Jesus tells his disciples how hard it is for a rich man to enter into the kingdom of heaven. And it was a sad scene, you know, where the rich young ruler, he had some kind of spiritual interest. He was aware that there was a next life coming and that this life is not the only life. He was aware of that. He wanted to assure himself that he would go to be with God and go in heaven after his death. So he came to Jesus and he wanted to get some answers from Jesus. And Jesus didn't give him what he thought he would get. I think the rich young ruler thought he would get, well, you know, give some of your money to the poor, or be a generous benefactor, or be kind, and Jesus said, obey the commands. But the rich young ruler said, well, what specifically should I do? And then that's when Jesus said, go take everything you have, sell and give to the poor. In other words, liquidate your entire wealth. And the man turned away and would not follow Jesus after that, because Jesus asked him to do something he could not do. And we ask ourselves, well, why couldn't the rich young ruler have just said, okay, Jesus, if that's what it takes, I will come follow you? Well, the reason the rich young ruler couldn't do that was that he loved money. Remember, it says the root of all kinds of evils is the love of money. And this rich young ruler loved money more than he loved the Lord, more than he loved the will of God for his life. And, you know, when we look at ourselves in the West here, especially the United States, we live in a pretty prosperous land. So we can't just simply look at this parable and go, well, boy, you know, if I were a rich person, I would really be shaking in my boots. If I were a wealthy, rich person, I would really feel convicted about that passage. No, we can't say that. We cannot take that attitude. The reason we can't is because when you come right down to it, compared with all the other people in the world, we are rich. Yes, we are rich. Even the people who might be classified poor, who might be labeled poor in our nation, in our wealthy, prosperous Western nation, the United States, even those people living technically below the poverty level, if you look at all of the people in the world today, even the people that live below poverty in the U.S. are rich compared to all the people in the world and the averages. Now, if you throw in all the people who have ever lived in the world, there's no question. Even people who are on the bottom rung of society today in the U.S., who are on every single government entitlement program that they can sign up for, who are classified below the poverty level, even those people would be considered wealthy compared to 99% of the people in ancient times or throughout all history of the planet Earth. No question about that. Because even people today in the U.S. who are below the poverty level have running water in their homes. They have hot and cold water. They have electricity. They have heat. And a lot of them have even air conditioning nowadays. They have food, wide variety of foods. So there's no starvation to speak of in the U.S. Now, there might be some people who actually do starve, but it's not because there aren't the resources there. It's maybe because due to some kind of disability or some kind of mental illness or something, they simply are not getting what is there available for them, and they starve in some rare instance. But even the people in the soup kitchens will usually not have starvation. They have a new category today, hunger, what is it called? Hunger risk, at hunger risk, or hunger needy, or hunger something. But even people at the very lower end of the U.S. economic scale are considered rich when you compare that with the entire world, and especially the ancient world. And so we can't dismiss this verse. Nobody in the West, nobody in the U.S. can simply say, oh, well, that's a rich person and his problems. No, that's you. That's me. We have to think and ask ourselves, do I love money? Do I love material things more than I love God? We are confronted with the same thing that this rich young ruler in the Bible was confronted with. And when we look at John Paul Getty, there's no question. He is the rich young ruler. I don't even know if he'd go to Jesus and ask the question. But he was the rich young ruler in the sense that he loved his money more than anything. And he loved his money obviously more than God because of his immoral lifestyle. It was like amoral. He didn't even have morals. It was all just, can I make a profit? What do I need to do to make a profit? And so the movie All the Money in the World is a good morality tale. It just shows the tragedy and the sorrow and the pain and the depravity and the dysfunctionality in the life of someone who has put all their hope in money. And it's a good story. I would recommend seeing the movie. There are some violent scenes in there, and it's kind of shocking, but it does underscore exactly what God is teaching in the Bible in a reverse way. It just shows the miserable miserliness of a rich man. It's kind of like an Ebenezer Scrooge kind of a tale before he was changed by the visions in the night. And it's a good one to use as a lesson. So I hope that's been a helpful movie review, and we'll see you back next week on another edition of Christian Answers. God bless.